Welcome on a lesson for solving quadratics by completing the square, where you will be able to complete the square by the end of this. So make sure you have a writing utensil ready, or if you're working on your iPad, make sure you have some place to write this, or if you have this PDF, to just write on that so you can submit it to your teacher. So first things first, we got to solve this. So you just got to get x by itself, right? So in order to get started, all you got to do is figure, well, x is almost alone. There is a method where you can make this equal to 0, but you only have to do that if you have x squared and an x. Here, you just have x squared, so you can take the square root of both sides. So I'll take the square root of both sides. So these essentially cancel out. So x is equal to the square root of 49, which is 7. However, there should be a positive and a negative square root 49. So x is equal to plus or minus 7, which means that if you plug 7 into the original equation, it'll equal 49 because 7 squared is 49. But if you plug in negative 7 into the equation, negative 7 squared is also 49. So you cannot assume that there's only one answer. There are two answers, and those are the zeros. So over here, let's try this one. Same deal, like we don't need to factor or anything. We can just move this over to the other side to isolate the x squared. So you'll have x squared equal to 13. So x is equal to plus minus square root 13. So there are your two solutions there. Over here, we almost have it. We just want to get rid of that squared over there, so we can square root both sides here, right? So x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 6. Now you just got to get x by itself, so you subtract 2 from both sides. You'd have x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus radical 6. So there are your two solutions, negative 2 plus radical 6 and negative 2 minus radical 6. So this continues. This one, again, you do this on your own, try that. You would square root both sides. So you'd have x minus 1 is equal to plus minus the square root of 8. And then you add 1 to both sides. So x is equal to positive 1, because I added 1, plus minus square root of 8. This one happens to be able to simplify that radical. So you can write that as square root 4 square root 2. So x is equal to 1 plus minus square root of 4 is 2 square root 2. Now this one, I can't get x squared by itself like I was able to in this case, in any of the other cases. This one has to be solved by factoring. Nicely, it's already equal to 0, so all you have to do is factor. The two first terms are going to multiply to get x squared. The two last terms are going to multiply to get 15. So it's positive 15. So you can say it's 1 and 15, or maybe it's negative 1 and negative 15 to make it positive. Or maybe it's 3 and 5, or maybe it's negative 3 and negative 5 that multiply to make it 15, positive 15. Well, whichever one we choose, they have to add to negative 8. They have to add to negative 8. And so to add to negative 8, that would be these two. So I will put those in, negative 3, negative 5 equals 0. So now I can set each one equal to 0 because it's two things multiplying to get 0. So that's x minus 3 equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. So x equals 3, x equals 5. So there are your two solutions. So we've been getting two solutions for all of them. This one's a little interesting. We're going to have to do this again because it has an x squared and an x. We have to factor. So if we can factor, and in this case we will find two things that will multiply. I'm going to just get it ready. I like to do that first. and it's got to multiply to 25. It's already equal to 0, so that's good news. It's got to multiply to positive 25, but add to 10. So I'm going to think about this. So I can do 1 and 25, or negative 1 and negative 25, or it can be 5 and 5, or negative 5, negative 5, but it looks like in this case it's 5 and 5. So that's equal to 0. So this is x plus 5 squared, because they're exactly the same. I can write that equals 0. So if I square root both sides, I can say x plus 5 is equal to, well, the square root of 0 is 0. I don't even need the plus or minus. So x is equal to negative 5. This one only had one solution. It's a little interesting. Just so you know, that would just mean that the graph is just touching for one moment there. All right, well, that's not the point of this whole lesson. The real point of this lesson is to get you to complete the square. So here, we'll go over quickly to see how you can complete the square. That's what we had up here. This was a perfect square, the one that's right here. This was a perfect square because when you factored it, it ended up being exactly the same. And that's what we want to see, if you can find that last number that would make it do the same exact thing. So I look at this and I see it's negative 16. So what must that last number be? And that I can add to it, that last term, so that it becomes, when I factor, a perfect square where they're exactly the same factors. So there is a trick to doing this. We're going to take half that number and square it. So that's negative 16 divided by 2 squared. So that's negative 8 squared, which is 64. So you add 64. So this is y squared minus 16y plus 64. That's a perfect square trinomial. That would be my perfect square trinomial. And the reason that that works, you can check if I factor and you say, hey, what multiplies to 64? But like that's exactly the same and gives you 16, you would say, oh, that's negative 8 and negative 8. So that was the whole point, so that you can write it as this to be all fancy. So now, what's the special number in this one that's going to do the same thing? Again, I take that number, I go half, I take that 6, I divide it by 2 squared. So that's 3 squared. And it's positive, right? So then that's 9. So it's plus 9. So if I do x squared plus 6x plus 9, that's a 9. That would be my perfect square trinomial. If I factor that, I would have x plus 3. In fact, I'd have x plus 3 squared. Okay? So finding that, being able to write a perfect square trinomial is the trick for completing the square, for solving by completing the square. So that's why we're doing this. So what about this one, though? I mean, it's a 5. It's okay. Just go 5 divided by 2 squared. So you square both of them. So it's 5 times 5, 25, 4 times 4. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 times 2. That's 4. So you're going to add that so that your trinomial looks like this. That's 5x plus 25 over 4. You can write it as a decimal if you like. It's fine too. If you factor this, it may be hard to factor, but it is still doable. It's going to be that half number up here. So it's going to be 5 over 2. I got that. I keep getting those half numbers from here. I get this half number, 5 over 2. I get it quickly from this half part. I did that here too. See, plus 3, that came from this half thing. And then that negative 8, that comes from here. And you'll be seeing that we will be using that trick to do this by solving by completing the square. So our ultimate goal for today is that you will be able to complete the square. This is sort of like a formula, I guess, of steps to do it. If you want to try, you can look at this. take a picture of it, save it, and follow it. But other than that, let's get started. I'll show you how this works. I'll take you step by step. So first things first, get it so that x squared, that the number that's by itself, which is called the constant, is on the other side of the equation. So all you have is x squared and x to contend with. So you subtract the 2 from both sides. So you move that over. So now you have x squared minus 12x equals negative 2. Now remember, I want to have that number I want to add at the end. So I'm going to take this thing right here, that negative 12. I'm going to be like, okay, negative 12, I need to cut you in half and then square you. So you're negative 6 squared, so that's 36. So that's the number I'm going to add to both sides. So this is x squared minus 12x plus 36, but I can't just add 36 to one side without adding it to the other side. So please make sure you add to both sides, okay? Now you can factor it. And when you factor, it's quick factoring. I'm going to combine these two. So that's 34. So when you factor, just remember it's going to be that half number in here that we got. That's what goes in here. So then that will be minus 6 minus 6. And you can check. They multiply to 36 but add to negative 12. So that's perfect. Now, here's the rest of it. Now you just rewrite this with a single exponent there, 34. And now you do how we solved before in the warm-up. You just take the square root of both sides. So x minus 6, because those cancel, is equal to plus minus the square root of 34. That plus minus is when you take the square root of two sides of an equation, you always need to do the plus minus. Consider the positive and the negative. You add 6 to both sides. Now when I add 6 to both sides, I just like to put it in front. I think it looks nicer. You don't have to, but I like it. Okay? And so this isn't irrational, but this is it. This is your answer. You have x equal to two solutions, 6 plus radical 34 and 6 minus radical 34. That's it. Let's try some more. Okay, more examples, the better for you. We're going to try a few more. All right, so here we go again. First things first, isolate. So move that negative 1 to the other side by adding 1 to both sides. So I'm going to add 1, add 1. So I have x squared plus 14x. I like to leave a little space, is equal to 8. Now I got to get that half number, remember? So I'm gonna get that special magic number. We're going to take 14 over 2 and square it. So that's 7 squared. That's 49. So then I'm going to add 49 to both sides. So plus 49, don't forget, you got to add it to the other side. So x squared plus 14x plus 49 is equal to 57. Okay. Now, you can factor this side. And then you can write when you factor it. I know normally you're not supposed to factor unless it equals 0. That's only when you're solving by factoring. We are not solving by factoring. We are solving by completing the square. So this is the only time you should really be factoring when the other side doesn't equal 0, is when you're going to do it by completing the square. So this is positive 7, positive 7. So this is x plus 7 squared is 57. So x plus 7 is equal to plus minus square root of 57. So, feeling like I'm running out of room here. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. So x is equal to negative 7 plus minus square root 57. And there we have it. That's our answer. Okay, so let's try another one. I'll use a different color. All right, so this time it's y's. It can be x's, it can be y's. So I'm going to move the 6 over. So I don't have to deal with that term. I want to move the constant. That's called the constant term because it's just a number. Equals 11. So I'm going to take half of that middle term. So that's 4 over 2 squared. So it's 2 squared, which is 4. And I'm going to add that 4 to both sides. No, I'm going to keep that. So, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So, because that's my magic number. So I'm going to do y squared plus 4y plus 4 equals 11 plus 4. You have to add them to both. I'm going to just start factoring here. So it's y, and that's 15. And I got to see what multiplies to 4, but adds to 4. I already know that it's going to be that half number. So then this is y plus 2 squared is 15. Now you just got to get y by itself. So you're going to square root both sides. Maybe this time I'll try a different color. So I'll square root both sides. So I get y plus 2 is equal to plus minus the square root of 15 minus 2 minus 2. So y is equal to negative 2 plus minus the square root of 15. And that's that. And that's your answer there. So now let's get to the next, a couple more practice problems. And after this, you should be on your own. So you try and get, what's the first thing we got to do? That's right. You got to add 2 to both sides. Then, what do I have to do? That's right. I got to take negative 2 and cut it in half, squared. So that's negative 1 squared. So that's 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So, and it's always adding, just to remind you. So now let's factor. What will the factors be? And now write it. So it's simplified. And now what do? That's right, you square root both sides. But don't forget to do the plus minus. So y is equal to positive 2 plus minus square root of 3. And there you have it. Okay, let's try another one. So this one's a little weird because they're in a little funny order. See how it's y squared, then plus 3, and then minus 8y. Remember, we got to isolate this and get rid of the constants. So I'm going to get rid of this constant. I don't need it. And then I'll have y squared minus 8y equals negative 2. Now I can take, so what's that number? What's the magic number that we're going to add to both sides? That would be negative 4 squared. So that's 16. So the magic number is 16. Remember, both sides. So now we got a factor. Minus 4, y minus 4. Some people start skipping steps. You can. Y minus 4 squared is 14. And now, just the solving part. I like to change the color up a little bit. So I will do square root to both sides. Don't forget there's a plus minus. So y minus 4 is equal to plus minus square root 14. Add 4 to both sides. So y is equal to positive 4 plus minus square root 14. And that's that. And now 2 more. And at this point, after these 2, you should be doing it. These are a little extra. So just to like, just to keep you challenged. So to see how you can do with this. So see, you can't do this. If you see what I have over here, it says, if A is not equal to 1, divide the quadratic by whatever that A is. Well, that is, A is referring to that first term in front of x squared. So I am going to divide everything that, because I cannot use this system of completing the square unless that first term is 1. So that's x squared minus 10x minus 2, and 0 divided by 2, well, that's 0. So now I can do what I've been doing. I take half that squared, that's negative 5 squared, that's 25, that's what I'm going to add to both of them. Oh, I was a little ahead. I was supposed to move the negative 2 first, so I'm going to do that. Sorry. X squared minus 10x equals positive 2. Now I'll add this to both sides. So now it's ready. So this I can factor. X minus 5 equals 27. And then I can write it as a single term that equals 27. Well, with a square, okay, let me just move that a little bit. And then you have square root both sides. I like to change the color. Square root. So you have x minus 5 equals, plus minus, the square root of 27. Add 5 to both sides. X equals 5 plus minus the square root of 27. And then that's that. That's an x. And we are almost done. One more, and then you should have it. This one is a cool one. So let's see. The reason that this one I like is I'm going to use a special color for this one. How about, this orangey type thing. That's cool. All right, so I don't want to forget to isolate, to get rid of the constant like I almost did before. So this is y squared minus 7y equals 2. Now, when I try to take that half number, I know what you're thinking, like you can't. Well, you can. It's just going to be a fraction, which is okay. So if you square both of those sides, it's really just negative 7 over 2 times negative 7 over 2. So you just multiply the numerators. So that's 49. It'll be positive, right? And you multiply the denominators, so that's 4. So that's what you're going to add to both sides. Okay, so this is y squared minus 7y plus 49 over 4. And then 2 plus 49 over 4. And you can simplify this by getting a common denominator. So you can say, well, that's over 1. And you can multiply the top and bottom. So you can say this is multiplied by, to get a common denominator, you want it to be 4. So multiply top and bottom by 4. Plus 49 over 4. So this would be 8 plus 49 over 4. So this side would be 57 over 4. Great. So I did all of that. Now this can be, let me get this other side where I can factor. So that's y. And I know it's going to be that half number. Remember, what's always in here is that half number. So that's going to be minus 7 over 2. Minus 7 over 2. So I like to rewrite it like y minus 7 over 2 squared. All right, so I'm just going to rewrite it here to catch up with the right side. And of course, we're going to square root both sides. So square root. So that's 7 over 2. So this is y minus 7 over 2, because those canceled, is equal to plus minus the square root of 57 over 4, the whole thing. And so now y is equal to, you add 7 over 2 to both sides. So that becomes positive 7 over 2, because I added to both sides, plus minus the square root of 57 over 4. That is a correct answer, but it can be simplified to be y equals 7 over 2 plus minus, and the square root of 57, you can't do much with, but the square root of 4 is 2. So you can leave it like that, or write it as a single fraction, but this is fine. I like it like this. I hope this helped.